What to spend? Web design isn't a cheap proposition. Although it's certainly possible to find someone to design your entire site for around $150, the old adage in this case holds true. You get what you pay for, and you're unlikely to get a high level of commitment or talent for those rates. Alternatively, it's certainly possible to find someone to design your entire site for around $3,000. But again, although you're nearly assured of a high-quality site, it's difficult for many startup businesses or even established businesses to drop that kind of money on a single project. Expect to pay anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 for a good direct response site. The more features you want on your site, the higher the price. If you want a good commerce system program to order, expect to pay at least $2,000 or higher. One strong argument for using a proprietary system. This may seem high, but consider what you're getting for the money. Web designers with enough experience to be valuable to you make their entire living from their designs as a rule. If you underpay them, then they're forced to take on other work in order to make a basic living, which means time taken away from your site and a lack of willingness to work with you in the future. This undermines many of the basic objectives of your business and can easily lead to your spending much more money down the line to fix any problems that are created by underpaying your programmers. So do it right the first time and pay for the level of quality you want to get, within reason, of course, and within your budget. Once you have a coder, you've made a huge step towards getting your site ready to go live. In order to go the rest of the way, keep reading as we talk about the next phase of the process, working with your coder in order to ensure the best site possible. 6. Coder collaborations. If you followed our advice so far, you've got a good sitemap and site design in your head. You've got an excellent coder at a reasonable price for both your coder and for you, and of course, you've got an outstanding product to sell. At this point, it's time to put all of these elements together to create a revenue-generating site that'll turn a profit. But in order to do that, you'll have to master one crucial skill: collaborating with your coder in order to create the perfect website for your purposes. The basics of collaboration. The first step in a fruitful coder collaboration is always to make your needs known as specifically as possible in the first communication. Ideally, your coder will be familiar with the basic principles of direct response site design, which keeps them on the same page as you throughout the process, and which eliminates some of the initial effort of explaining yourself. If your coder isn't familiar with the basics of direct response site design, make sure to communicate it to them as soon as possible in the collaboration process. The same 3 rules we gave you earlier in this book will be perfectly fine for your coder as well, as long as you back it up with all the rest of the work you've been putting into your design ideas as well. Of immense help in the collaboration process will be your basic sitemap. This gives your coder the basic template in which he or she can start bringing your more complicated ideas to life, as well as a sense, a not very fleshed out sense, true, but a sense of what the finished product will look like as well as how it will behave. Don't think of it as condescending to give a sitemap to your coder either. It isn't, and he or she is likely to thank you for it. It makes your coder's job infinitely easier, speeds up the overall process of building and revising the site, and saves you from any unwanted additional charges down the line. Once your designer has the basics of direct response design down, and once you've given him or her a copy of the all-important sitemap, it's time to start thinking more specifically in terms of overall style and feel. Here's where the process of collaboration can start to resemble a true collaboration, rather than you simply telling your coder exactly what you want and expecting delivery. There are 2 ways to play this, or rather, there are 2 extremes you can take when working with your coder on the overall look and feel of a page. The coder makes the page look exactly like you want it to. The coder, using his or her individual design skills and abilities, designs the look of your page for you from the ground up. The best method of collaboration lies somewhere between those 2 extremes. To some, the first extreme is the obvious choice. You know the product after all. You know the principles of direct response site design. You've built the sitemap, and you've put a great deal of work into designing the site in order to take full advantage of the basic principles while giving customers easy access to all portions of your website. Any work the coder puts into your page design at this point can only serve to complicate things. It can make the site much more difficult for customers to use, for example, or it can put an undue amount of strain on your web server or overall bandwidth, or it simply won't look right to you. After all, the coder is your employee. You're paying him or her to produce a website for you. Since you're putting out the money, you should expect to get exactly what you've designed, exactly what you want. To others, the second extreme is the obvious choice. Yes, you know the product, and yes, you design the sitemap, but you're not at all sure that you know how that sitemap should be fleshed out. You have ideas, of course, but your coder is a professional in the field of web design, has plenty of experience designing other sites, if you followed our advice in the previous chapter about finding a coder, and brings his or her own distinct personality and visual style to the product. The work the coder puts into your page design may solve some of the problems that your original design ideas didn't anticipate. That work might improve the efficiency of your site's load time. It might give customers additional, unobtrusive methods for getting to all of the important content on your site. Or it might simply dazzle you and your customers with its innovative look and feel. The coder is your employee, yes, but part of what you want when you pay that employee is their instinct and expertise, not merely their ability to follow your orders. You expect to get the basic site you've designed, yes, but you also expect to get something that exceeds your expectations, something that could only come from your specific coder. The best method for your particular site and your particular coder is probably somewhere in the middle. Talk to the coder about your visual and other design ideas. Give them any sketches, notes, or other work that you've put into the site. Explain to them some of your general concepts and talk about what you absolutely don't want to see on the site for whatever reason. Then, once you've communicated some of the specific things you want and don't want on your site, let your coder loose on the project. The coder will feel better about the project. You're not leaving every decision up to them, which can paralyze a less experienced coder, or which can result in a site that you, as the client, absolutely hate. But you're still giving them a good measure of autonomy in working on your site, which engages their creativity, encourages them to seek out and solve any design problems in their own personal style, and encourages them to work with you again on any future projects or site expansions that may be necessary in the future. Of course, you shouldn't cut your coder completely loose once they have your basic instructions and design ideas. The easiest way to guarantee success with a page design is to maintain a regular schedule of communication with your coder throughout the project in order to ensure that he or she isn't wasting time implementing features that you ultimately don't want to use in the site, and to ensure that your coder is staying on task throughout the project. What's the right schedule to keep for regular communications with your coder? This depends on the overall size of the project. Any direct response website is going to require less work than a sprawling full site of image galleries, articles, or content nodes. For the average direct response site, expect to give your coder about a week to build the first draft of the site, and schedule another meeting either 1 week from the start of the project or a day or two after the first draft of the site is turned in. If you choose the latter option, make sure to schedule a meeting 1 week from the start of the project, whether the first draft of the site is turned in yet or not. You don't want your coder to stall indefinitely on the site, costing you time and money, and a reasonable but firm deadline for a progress report guarantees that you won't be wasting that time or money. Keep up that regular schedule of contact until you and your coder both arrive at a version of the site that you can be happy with. And above all, make sure your coder has access to all of the resources he or she needs in order to complete the site. This means giving them any photos they need, any product specifications or testimonials you want to include on the site, details on the commerce system you'll be using, and of course the all-important sales letter, which we'll talk about in great detail in the next chapter. Ideally, you should get this to your coder immediately upon hiring them and holding your first design meeting with them. If that simply isn't an option for whatever reason, set a specific date when you'll provide the information and hold to it. Under no circumstances should you expect the coder to design your entire page without having access to these crucial resources, even if you know enough HTML to plug them in yourself once they're available. Minor differences in the size of an image, the length of a sales letter, or even the commerce system you intend to use can result in hours of work on the part of your coder as he or she tries to adjust the site design to accommodate your photos and resources, hours of work that you'll end up paying for. So either get your resources to your coder as soon as possible, or simply delay hiring a coder until you have all your resources available. There's no point in asking someone to build a website for you if you can't give them all of the tools they need to build it. Additional charges, how to handle them. Don't be afraid of additional charges. Don't be totally comfortable with them either. See the next section. As good as your basic sitemap and strategy are, they won't always be able to stand up against the various problems that occur when translating a good idea into a reality. And when those problems occur, it'll cost you and your coder both money and time in order to correct them. Additional charges can crop up for any number of reasons, but always crop up from only one of two sources, you or your coder. You might realize at some point in the design process that there's a better way to organize your basic sitemap, that there's a certain angle for selling your product that you'd like to incorporate into your website, or that your original design ideas pale in comparison to what you've just come up with. Your coder, on the other hand, might build your site exactly to specifications, test it out, and find that there's a fundamental problem with your collective solution to the three basic design problems of direct response site design. The interface might not be wholly intuitive, for example, or your commerce system might not be integrating with the page properly in order to give customers a seamless ordering experience. You have two tasks when responding to additional charges. Are they necessary? How much are they worth? The first task requires you to look at the website as it stands and determine whether your customer's experience will be negatively impacted by whatever problem you or your coder has come up with. This isn't just a matter of determining whether the site works or doesn't work. It's also a creative problem of figuring out if you can make the site work without requiring a great deal of additional effort on the part of your coder. If your basic sitemap is too complicated, is there a way to untangle it by moving around existing HTML files and changing a few links? Or is it necessary to rebuild the site from scratch? If your user interface is complicated, is there a way to scale it back from Flash to HTML, say without requiring a great deal of additional coding and testing? If your commerce system is buggy, can you find another one to drop in without requiring a total redesign? These kinds of issues will have to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, according to your specific site and product. Once you've determined that you have a legitimate reason to authorize additional charges, you'll have to determine just what to charge. Listen to your coder's advice, balance that against a list of standard design fees and the total cost of your project, and approve whatever your budget is capable of approving with an eye to any more unforeseen charges that may come up. Whatever you decide on, make sure that you don't simply allow your coder to act like an auto mechanic, make the repairs first, bill you for it later. This is another reason why it's essential to maintain regular contact with your coder while the site is being built. Make it clear that if your coder encounters any potential problems, he or she is to report it to you before making any changes. This limits the coder's autonomy to some extent, but it also saves you a great deal of money, which is usually worth the slight time delay that approving each change will take. When is the process complete? The simple answer to the problem of when you consider your site complete: when it's done. The more complicated answer depends on one of two things happening. You have the site you want. You can't afford to pay the coder for any more revisions. Unless your site simply doesn't work, meaning that it actually crashes browsers when it loads or that the individual pages don't link together properly, don't be afraid to accept the second outcome. Remember our TV analogy? The ultimate goal of a direct response website isn't to be beautiful, but to sell a product. Yes, making your site beautiful, intuitive, and efficient can help with this ultimate goal, but it's more helpful to have a website that works and does its basic job. And remember that you're running a business, not an art museum. The basic rule of business is not to let your costs exceed your profits, and until your site has been up for a while and has plenty of referrer links and other promotion, your profits aren't going to be massive and certainly not high enough for you and your coder to spend infinite time picking at the tiny flaws in your website. If you exceed or come close to exceeding your design budget and you have a site that functions, contact your coder, pay what you owe, and call an end to the process. But make sure to leave the door open. Once you're making some money from the site, you may want to go back to that same coder in order to finally get your site to the level of perfection you want, or to expand your site into something else altogether. Just because it doesn't make good business sense to refine your website now doesn't mean that you don't want to refine it in the future, and possibly a nearer future than you think if your product and your overall strategy are where they should be. So far, we've covered the basic principles of direct response site design. We've covered how to build your own basic site, and we've covered the process of hiring and working with a coder to make your site all it should be. But there's one crucial element of a good direct response site that we've left out: the sales letter. In the next chapter, we'll discuss just that, the final piece of the direct response puzzle. 7. The sales letter. The sales letter is at the heart of any good direct response website. As we touched on in the chapter about basic site design, your website always needs a good front page, and your sales letter should always be the bulk of that front page. Without a good, prominent sales letter, you may have the best website on the internet, and if you follow our advice in the previous chapters, you'll certainly have a good shot at making that claim, but you won't be able to effectively convert website traffic into actual customers, and that fails the basic purpose of direct response site design: selling the product. So make sure that your sales letter is prominent, and using the techniques and theories in this chapter, make sure that it's good. Sales letter format. Think about what a sales letter actually does. Your sales letter is responsible for 3 things: introducing the customer to your product, arguing persuasively about the merits of that product, inspiring the customer to actually purchase the product. This seems like a simple structure, but it requires you to use 3 distinct modes of writing throughout and to seamlessly transition from one to the other. It also requires you to do this in a fairly brief span of time, about which we'll talk more in just a moment. The first section of the sales letter is your introduction. Within the introduction, you want to state clearly what your product is. This is not the place to get persuasive about your product. This is simply the place to describe its essential nature so that any customer knows right up front what it is that you're selling. A new type of corkscrew should be described right up front as a new type of corkscrew. A new online fantasy novel should be described right up front as a new online fantasy novel. Our third basic principle of direct response site design holds true here. Keep it simple, stupid. Online customers have millions of other websites that they could be visiting, and if your sales letter starts off too fancily, obscurely, or densely, they're going to leave your site for one of those other millions. So don't try to dazzle your readers by going into the long history of wood carving in order to promote your handcrafted wind chimes. And don't sermonize about the history of art and information in order to promote your web design software package. Your first line should always read something like this: Foo is a new type of widget from the brilliant designers at Acme. Where Foo is the product, widget is its description, and Acme is your company's name. Immediately your customer knows what you're selling, how the product might fit into their lifestyle, and who's doing the selling. You laid your cards on the table, and with this level of simplicity, your customers will be much more willing to pick them up and play. The second part of your sales letter, the argument, is where you start getting fancy, introducing some dazzle into your presentation of your product. Your customers know what you're selling. Now they're waiting for you to sell it to them. Use whatever tools are appropriate to your product. For a mechanical gadget or appliance, you might talk about how your product specifications outperform many of the leading brands in your market. For a piece of art, you might talk about the high level of training and craftsmanship on the part of the artist, or about the prestige and delight that a piece of well-made art can give. For a piece of software, you might discuss the benefits your product gives in terms of compatibility, efficiency, and usefulness, all while emphasizing your cutting-edge technology and your company's history of innovation in software making. Anything goes, as long as it's persuasive and as long as you don't get too long-winded at any point. You want to convince your readers not to lecture them, and you certainly don't want to bore them into leaving your site. Once you've said your piece, it's time to move smoothly into the third and final part of your sales letter, the conclusion, which turns your reader from a passive admirer of your product into an active consumer of the product. Like the first part of your letter, don't get fancy with this. A simple call to action will do. Don't wait, try food today by clicking here. By all means, you should use the imperative voice. Instead of telling your customer that you can click here to try food, command them to click here in order to download, order, whatever. That switch from the descriptive to the imperative, from telling to commanding, is often all that's necessary to decide the issue in the mind of an undecided customer. You can and should dress it up a bit, of course. You might close with a pithy line, reiterate your product slogan or motto, or simply fall back on the standard closer like, "Try it today." As long as you don't bore your reader or spend too much time distracting them from the business of clicking on your purchase link, anything goes. You might also direct them to the other sections of your website in order to learn more if it's appropriate to your product, as long as you followed our earlier advice and made it simple to order the product from any point on your site, of course. Sounds simple? It is, and it isn't. As long as your sales letter takes into account these 3 basic points, it'll be somewhat effective. But if you can not only give your customers persuasive arguments but interesting expressions, if you can seamlessly transition from one section of your sales letter to the next without alerting your customers, and if you can use your language to activate your readers' emotions without making them aware of it, then you'll delight and persuade your readers still more, and they'll respond by clicking on your purchase link more. So it's worth taking some time to make your sales letter all it can be, or it's worth spending some money on a good marketing copywriter who can do the same. Your sales letter is the heart of your site, after all. Make sure it beats. Formatting issues for websites. A general rule of sales letters is to keep them as short as you can. But of course, we aren't dealing with general sales letters. We're dealing with a very specific type of sales letter, one designed to be viewed and read online. And that brings with it some additional rules in order to ensure that your sales letter not only works at converting readers into customers, but that it functions within your website while taking into account all of the possibilities available on the internet that traditional sales letters aren't capable of. One of these advantages is the ability to delegate parts of your content to different parts of your site. In traditional commerce, your sales letter is your one chance to tell potential customers everything they might need to know about your product. One of the advantages of the internet, however, is that you have an entire website's worth of space to convince people of the merits of your product by whatever means necessary, bearing in mind the limits we imposed in this chapter on basic site design, of course. But that greater freedom imposes a greater responsibility on you to decide what you should include in your sales letter and what you should leave out. A lengthy testimonial from a satisfied customer might make a crucial difference in making the sale, of course, but do you really want to make all of your customers read through a 600-word product testimonial in order to get to your final call to action? Conversely, you might be able to write several pages worth of information about the new compression technology in your new digital video playback software, but shouldn't at least some of that go into your sales letter? A simple rule you can use to resolve these problems is this: make sure that any lengthy but persuasive section of your sales argument gets a page to itself, but at the same time, you should at least touch on that information in the sales letter in as brief and as persuasive a manner as possible. For example, one of the selling points of your graphics software package might be its intuitive, attractive user interface. You should show off that interface by including a detailed gallery of screenshots or videos, allowing your customers to see for themselves what your product has to offer. But you should also include in your sales letter a mention of this interface. What's more, Foo contains one of the most intuitive user interfaces currently on the market. In just 60 seconds, you can learn all you need to know about how it works, giving you the edge you need to create dynamic graphics. This rule holds true for any product. If you're selling art, mention some of its most prominent admirers in addition to linking to their testimonials. If you're selling soap, give your customers a picture of it in action and mention its lathering power in your letter. This not only reinforces the selling points that you want to make, but it ensures that if your readers just proceed directly from the sales letter to the purchasing decision without taking advantage of the rest of your site, you haven't left out any of the arguments that allow them to make that decision in your favor. One more practical formatting issue brings back the question of building and coding your website. A long sales letter can bore your readers, yes, but it can also make your carefully designed site look terrible on any browser by spilling the text over your images or out of your frames. This is going to be a problem that you and your coder will have to work out as part of the overall design and coding process. So make sure to get your first useful draft of your sales letter to your coder early, and make sure that you know how to cut it down, rearrange it, or otherwise allow it to fit comfortably into your site design if the need arises. And one minor technical point. If you write your sales letter in a word processing program like Word or OpenOffice, you'll have access to formatting options like bold text, italics, different fonts, or even colors. Be very, very careful about using these, because they often don't translate well from your word processor to your website's HTML file, and can in some cases even create additional charges as your coder tries to frantically incorporate your formatting decisions into your site's actual code. Changing the formatting is often a crutch. Weak writers change the style of their fonts or text in order to achieve effects that their words alone can't achieve. Save yourself some trouble. Keep your text simple and free of formatting tricks. Your coder will thank you, and your sales letter will be better as a result. Must a sales letter be boring? To return to the TV analogy, when many of us think of infomercials, we think of the same basic structure: a desk, a host, a product demonstration, a few arguments in favor of the product, and then ordering information. We tend to think along these lines because most of the infomercials we see never reach beyond this basic, safe format. And when we think of typical sales letters, we tend to think of basic, safe letters that get the job done without necessarily entertaining the reader. But there have been other infomercials on the airwaves. For example, a popular adult infomercial in the 90s tried to sell a male enhancement cream to customers not by offering a product demonstration, a dicey proposition on any channel or network considering the product, but by making their infomercial into something entertaining in its own right. The infomercial producers hired adult film stars, built sets, and turned what could have been a boring yet salacious infomercial into a quiz show, complete with innuendo, double entendres, and genuinely engaging content. The result was a memorable infomercial which meant a memorable product and increased sales. Your sales letter can aspire to the same level, as long as you keep to the 3 basic parts of any good sales letter: inform, persuade, convert readers into customers. You have infinite freedom in terms of content. You might present your sales letter in comic strip form, for example, or you might write your sales letter in engaging verse. You might write your sales letter in dialogue form, or you might write about a new piece of software as if it had come through a time portal from a technologically advanced future. Don't bore the reader, of course, by getting too cute with your sales letter, but don't bore them by keeping your sales letter bland either. What your readers think of your sales letter will be, if you do your job right, what they will think of your product. So, if you can pull off a unique, entertaining sales letter, or if you're willing to pay for the services of someone who can, do it. A simple sales letter will get the job done, yes, but an entertaining sales letter will get the same job done better. Once you have your sales letter, your website, and of course your product, your work is almost done. It's time to take a look at the last, and from the point of view of selling products, the most important component of your successful direct response website: your commerce system and managing the overall revenue and costs of your site, both online and offline.